Hi, this is Sudeep Manchanda from Quite Easily Done. This video is a part of the series Know Your Component, and we will be talking about semiconductors today. In this video, we will cover what are semiconductors, the doping process which would help us create the N-type and the P-type semiconductors. So let's get started. Semiconductors are those magical things that happened to the modern electronics world which transformed everything around us. Any device that we pick up is filled up with semiconductors. And for those of us who would have learned about history of computers, we would have known the computers being of the size of a room which would consume enormous amount of power and give out huge amounts of heat. Those were the days when semiconductors were not there, and from that to a world where now we have powerful mobile phones and amazing computing devices, those all transformations came in because of the semiconductors. So what exactly are semiconductors? To first understand, so we by now obviously know about conductors. Some are those materials which have the capabilities of conducting current, or the current can flow through them. They're good conductors. And we know about bad conductors, those materials which do not allow conducting of electricity through them. Good conductors, the good examples are metals. Any metal, iron or any other metal, copper for that matter, if we take one of the best examples, is those are very good conductors of electricity which provide very low resistance. Wood or any other such material are bad conductors of electricity. Semiconductors is something whose conductivity is between a good conductor and a bad conductor. So semiconductor is majorly created by a doping process, and doping is adding impurities to a non-conducting material to be able to make it conducting. The most common example is using silicon. So silicon is by itself is a bad conductor of electricity, and we would understand why is that the case. So if we get into a bit of chemistry around it, we understand that the silicon has an atomic number of 14, and we know that means is it has 14 electrons and 14 protons, electrons being the negatively charged items and protons being the positively, and 14 of each means it's neutral by itself. Now in chemistry we know if that the center of an atom is the nucleus, which includes all the protons. So the 14 protons of silicon is going to be there in the center nucleus, and the 14 electrons would be placed in different rings or shells. The innermost actually happens to have just 2 electrons into it, and the second level ring would have 8, 6, 7 and 8. So we know that the number of electrons in a shell would try and be either 2 or 8 of that order for being able to attain stability. So we have said 2 in the 0 ring and 8 in the ring 1, which makes 10, and we said we would be having 14 electrons in all. So there are 4 last valent electrons, as it is called, which is the one which is there in the outermost shell. So in the last ring you see we have 4 valent electrons, and if we look at a molecule of silicon where multiple atoms of this is just one atom of silicon, and if we see multiple atoms, what happens in that case is so this one has 4 electrons in the outermost shell, so does this atom, and even this guy over here would have 4 electrons in the outermost shell, like this. Now I'm just changing color to show the center atom also has 4 electrons into it. So what happens is the 4 electrons, as we said, the chemistry tells us that the outermost ring of any ring would try and have either 2 or 8 electrons for stability. So what happens is the adjacent atoms, the one electron from each would enter in and create a cohesive bond, which is what I'm highlighting in the red over here. These cohesive bonds bind the atoms together in terms of in molecules and create stability, and because of which, now because each of these electrons are in a bond state, so they're not free to move around because they have to be, they're shared between atoms, so they cannot move around freely. So silicon by itself naturally does not have any free electrons, and hence when we try and connect it to a battery source, you will not be able to see any flow of current because it does not have free electrons. Current is because of flow of electrons. So ultimately silicon by itself is a non-conductor. Doping is a process by which we add impurities to anything. Any foreign element which increases the performance is called a dope. You might have heard the term with respect to athletes also, where they would take in some additional external material which would help them enhance their performance, and that process is doping for them. Similarly, we can do doping for a silicon molecule also, where we can add in additional impurities to it to enhance its performance, in this case being the conductivity of current. So in order to simplify our further work going ahead, what we would do is we would not represent the molecule in this complex way of showing multiple rings and electrons. We would make it simply by saying we have these rings that I'm drawing right now are atoms, and the arrows that the lines that I'm drawing are the 2 electrons combined together to form a cohesive bond. So to carry it forward, this is one atom surrounded by 4. Each of the atom would be surrounded by 4 again. So that is how the structure of silicon would look if we look into detail. This would keep going on and on. So each line that I'm drawing is the red portion, the cohesive bond, and each circle is a silicon atom. So this is without doping. We said there are no free electrons, and so the flow of current cannot happen in this. Now when we try and doing doping, the doping can be done in 2 ways. One of the most common elements that we use for doping is phosphorus. Phosphorus is used to create what we say is an N-type semiconductor. Phosphorus has an atomic number of 15. An atomic number of 15 would mean you would have the nucleus in the center. The first ring would have 2 electrons. Second would have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8 electrons, similar to silicon. The last ring, instead of having 4, would have 5. 2, 3, 4 and 5. Now when we dope our silicon with phosphorus, and let's say this center silicon, we replace it with a green color of phosphorus. So the green is phosphorus, the rest all is silicon. When we do that, the 4 of these electrons in the outermost shell would create cohesive bonds with silicon, as silicon was doing earlier. But now we have is an additional electron over here. And similarly, let's say we replace another of silicon over here with phosphorus, we would have another additional electron coming in. So now when we connect this to a battery source, you see we would be able to have a flow of current because we have these additional electrons over here. But remember, because in this case, because when you are applying a potential difference over here, these electrons will be attracted towards the positive terminal of the battery, and additional electrons would flow from the negative terminal into the doped semiconductor to replenish the electrons that have moved out from it. Always remember that we added a phosphorus atom which had 14 protons and 14 neutrons. It's not that we have added an extra electron alone by the doping process. We have not only added an additional electron, we have also added an additional proton. So it is not that the n-type semiconductor is negatively charged. It's called an n-type semiconductor because the conduction of electricity would happen due to the flow of negatively charged items called electrons. So by itself, by characteristic, the n-type semiconductor is neutral in charge, but it is able to conduct electricity because of the additional electrons that have come into place. Now, so this is how we create is an n-type semiconductor. Similarly, we can also create is a p-type semiconductor. For understanding a p-type semiconductor, we would take the example of the doping material being boron. Now, boron has an atomic number of 5, which means it has a nucleus with 5 protons into it. It would have one ring which would have 2 electrons into it. The second ring would have the remaining 3 electrons. Now let's say the green molecule that we were talking of earlier is now boron instead of proton, we were saying earlier. Now what happens now is the three electrons that you see in the outer shell, the valence electrons in case of boron, 3 of them would be used to create the cohesive bonds like we were doing it earlier, the 1 here, 2 here and 3 here. That would happen. The fourth electron that was into a cohesive we don't have the fourth electron to have a cohesive bond with another atom over here at the bottom. So we would have what we call as the development of a hole over here and over here. A hole is a place where an electron is deficient for stability point of view, not from a charge point of view. It is not that again that when we dope silicon with boron, it does not become positively charged. Because the number of electrons and protons net remains the same. It is just that we are short of one electron to be able to provide an stability to the entire molecular structure. So a place where an electron could have fit in is called a hole. Now when we apply a battery to this doped silicon, which is doped with boron, the electrons from the negative terminal of the battery would flow in and fill these gaps. They fill the gaps in the hole over here, and once it is here, you would start developing a negative charge because you have added an electron into it. Ultimately, because of the nature of electrons, this would get attracted towards another hole. The electron would move from the first hole to the second hole, and this place would develop an hole again, which would then be filled in by a new electron. So the electron keeps moving in from the negative terminal to the positive terminal as it always does, but what we say is it seems to us that it is the holes which is moving from the positive to the negative. As we saw, because the electron occupied this hole, and then it moved ahead and occupied the second hole, creating the hole behind it again. It felt to us that the hole moved from the second position to the first one. So we say in a p-type semiconductor, the conduction of electricity is happening due to the flow of the holes. Practically it happens due to the flow of electrons only, but we say it that it is happening due to the flow of the positive particle, the hole, and hence we call such a semiconductor as a p-type semiconductor. So to recap very quickly, we had a silicon atom which by itself does not conduct any electricity, and we have doped it first using phosphorus, which helped us add a free moving electron into this into the molecular structure, and this free moving electron helped in the conduction of electricity, and we said now it is a semiconductor of n type because of an excess free electron into it. Similarly, when we doped the semiconductor with boron, we said we created holes or places where electrons were required for stability purposes, and because of the presence of these holes, electrons moved to create a flow of current. But we said that in such a case, we say it feels to us that the current is being generated because of the flow of the holes, which is positive in nature. So we said we were able to achieve conductivity in this case, and we called it a p-type semiconductor. So that is all about semiconductor basics that I wanted to share with you guys. We would be talking more about semiconductor devices in the upcoming videos. Please let me know about your comments, any questions that you would have, or any feedback. Thank you very much.